Now, for a congressional perspective on the week's events is Congressman Adam Schiff, the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
What is your reaction to the events following Charlottesville?
I think, like most people, I was appalled. I was at the time in Normandy with my son, who was a teenager, and we were looking at the bitter cost that was paid to defeat these ideas of racial supremacy, and to turn on the TV and see back home these ugly actions by these neo-Nazis and white supremacists, and the violence and the attack on that woman who came to protest that pernicious ideology was just horrible. And then,
what are your thoughts on the way President Trump responded? Congresswoman Jackie Spear this week came out and said he should be removed under the 25th Amendment. Do you think he should be removed from office?
Well, I think his reaction was just appalling, to suggest that those that gathered to protest these Nazis and white supremacists were somehow equally to blame. Was just awful, and reflected, I think, a complete lack of judgment by the president, and some flaw of character that I have a hard time defining.
Do you think the president should be removed from office, though? Do you agree with Congresswoman Spear on that?
You know, I don't know whether, those comments rise to the level of incapacity in office. Certainly this is not a president who I supported or believe in. I think a lot of his actions are inimical to the national interest, but whether it rises to the level of Article 25 incapacitation, I don't know that we're there yet. But I do think you have a lot of people now on both sides of the aisle raising serious questions about his fitness for office. You saw Senator Corker with some very strong words about the president's capacity that we haven't heard from Republicans until very recently, and I think that's significant.
We've seen a number of Confederate monuments and symbols down across the country. There are still Confederate statues inside the U.S. Capitol representing 9 southern states. House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi has called for their removal. What is your position on that?
Well, I agree with Leader Pelosi. I think that those statues belong in museums in the proper context so that people can understand when they were erected, what those figures' role was in history. But in the Capitol, that's a place usually where we have statues that bring the country together, that are a source of pride for the country. These statues don't fall in that category, and I think they should be in a museum.
Do you think Congress should at this point convene a special commission to look into the rise of white supremacy groups, see what the dangers are, see what can be done about it? The Southern Poverty Law Center says there are nearly 80 hate groups in just California alone.
I think that's a worthwhile idea. What we're seeing in the United States right now, frankly, we're seeing in other parts of the world as well. We've seen a rise of anti-Semitism in Europe, and in particular in places like Hungary. We're seeing, strong anti-immigrant sentiments that were in part responsible for Brexit. And I think this is also not unrelated to the rise we're seeing in authoritarianism around the world, and this is a real global challenge. So understanding why this is coming out now, why it is rising to the fore, I think is very worthy of our study and every effort to resist it.
Is it something you might call for yourself, convene a special commission on this?
Well, I would certainly support that idea. And I have to say, though, one of the things that is most concerning about all this is that rather than have a president who unequivocally rejects this and tries to bring the country together, we have a president who's making the problem worse. And I think just fanning the flames. And more than that, doesn't seem to recognize that's what he's doing. No commission can solve that problem, I'm afraid.
I'd like to ask you about the international issue of North Korea as well. This week, South Korean President Moon Jae-in said President Trump has agreed to seek his consent before launching any military action against North Korea. How would you characterize the current state of relations between North Korea and the United States?
Well, they've always been, extraordinarily poor, given that North Korea has been run by mercurial dictators since its founding. I do think they've reached a new and dangerous stage where you have belligerent statements from Pyongyang matched by often belligerent, bombastic statements from our own president. That's not helpful. I think what is helpful are the sanctions that we obtained at the United Nations. putting additional pressure on China to clamp down on the trade of North Korea. We have to hope that we can impress upon China the importance of really cutting off North Korea's financial and export lifeline until it comes to the table, to bring about a cessation of its nuclear and missile programs and ultimately a rollback of those programs. But the belligerent statements, the suggestion that comments out of Pyongyang are going to result in, fire and destruction, none of that advances the objective of halting North Korea's programs. In some ways, it's in fact deeply counterproductive. So it's a dangerous situation. I read with interest those comments coming from South Korea. I don't know that, frankly, you would have a commander-in-chief say something quite that broadly. If the United States needed to protect itself, we're not going to seek the permission of other countries to do that.
Are you casting doubt on whether Mr. Trump said it at all, or are you?
Who knows with this president? It's certainly, I would hope, the case that if we were going to embark on any military action that was not an emergent response to a direct attack or impending attack by North Korea, that we would consult with all of our allies in the region. But I would never, as Commander-in-Chief, give any country a veto over what was necessary to protect our country.
And we only have about 30 seconds remaining here, but if I could just ask you for a quick update on the Russia investigation. I know that your panel's investigation is continuing, but have you had any contact with Special Counsel Bob Mueller on his investigation? We
have, and we're doing our best to coordinate with him, with his office. We obviously don't want to take any step that might interfere in his ability to prosecute someone if he finds the evidence to support that.
Are you privy to any of that information along the way?
Well, we're certainly developing our own information. We have some insights into what the special counsel is doing. But again, it's a relationship of coordination. It's not working hand in hand.
All right. Congressman Adam Schiff, so nice to have you in our studio
Thank you.
today. Thank you for coming by.